What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of my mental health journey. Today is September 30th, 2023. I am joined by my good friend John Robinson and the lovely Leanne Davis. Today, we're going to
Hi.
expand on what we talked about last week. So, last week, the focus was just on having a general conversation about the mental health pressures of creating generational wealth for you and your family. This week, we're going to get a little bit more specific and we're going to talk about some of the things that you actually need to make that happen. So, well, let's start with Leanne. You know,
Mhm.
let's let the people know who you are and what you're doing and how they can find you.
Yes, my name is Leanne Davis, and I am most recently a cast member of Ready to Love Dallas. So that's wonderful and has been really exciting, interesting journey, and very fortunate to have met some wonderful people in the process, like Ty. And my background is mainly fitness. That's what I've done most of my career, and I am now a realtor as well. And I can be found on all social media at Leanne Davis Living. That's LEIANNDAVIS, Leanne Davis Living. .com or Instagram at Davis Living.
Right.
What's up, everybody? You should know me by now, John Robinson. If you're looking for me, you can catch me on LinkedIn, and that's pretty much it for me.
All right, cool. I know that Leanne, thanks. You already mentioned multiple streams of income. I know we're going to
Mm-hmm.
get into that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as you could probably see, or if you don't know, Rob's
Mm-hmm.
representing, his company as well.
Mm-hmm.
Norlux with the hat. I normally get on the streams with my company, the Cover Six Solutions shirt on, or something. You'll see me in a video. I normally try to find a sneaky way to put that in there, like in my reels or
Mm-hmm.
you know
Mm-hmm.
on IG or what have you. But as I mentioned earlier, I just want to go into uh, some of the top 10 things that I feel are very important to set the foundation for generational wealth. In my opinion, there are some things that are a lot easier to do than others. I did kind of rank them. Um, it's flashing, on the ticker down the bottom. You all may have a difference of opinion on what order that should be in. By no means, I am no expert. We're not billionaires up here on the panel, but I can assure that we are successful. And I can also assure you that it probably wasn't easy making that happen. So I know Leanne missed the um, the
Last
talk
week.
last week about the mental health pressures of making that happen. But if you just Leanne, Leanne, if you just want to just real quick talk about the mental health. Is it me, Leanne? You can hear me,
I
right?
lost you again.
Okay.
I'll be back.
Okay. Yeah. So, Rob,
Yes,
we'll
sir.
start with you. Let's talk about this financial education aspect of it all
hmm
and how that may have started with you and where you are with it right now.
Yeah, great question, Ty. So for me, um, you know, I've talked about my background before, right? In terms of humble beginnings, growing up single parent household. My mom always told me with regard to finances, make sure you save for a rainy day, right? That was kind of the lesson that I learned growing up all through my life. It was more of surviving as opposed to thriving in terms of the money management aspects of my financial literacy. And when I decided to go off to the military, was when I had a conversation with my dad because my dad was also in the army, spent a career in the army, and he said to me, he said, "Son," he said, you got to start. You got to start preparing yourself financially. I didn't really know what that meant. I was more so just kind of focused on the first and the 15th, right? Um, he signed me up for a magazine, a financial literacy magazine called Kiplinger's. And I didn't know what I was reading. I was like 18, 19 years old. And it was just a bunch of financial talk that I didn't really understand. And I told him, I said, Dad, I don't really get this stuff. So he said, all right, well, I'm gonna set you up with a financial planner. And I'll never forget, it was I was 18, 19 years old, I think probably 19 years old. I sat down with this lady, and she was about 65 years old. And she's telling me all the things that I can do with my money whenever I turn 59 and a half. None of that resonated with me. But all I knew was that my dad said that I needed to talk to this lady and she was going to get me straight. So needless to say, making a little private first class salary in the United States Army, barely enough money to even have any fun. There were these deductions that were coming out. I did that for about a year. And then I stopped. She signed me up for a Roth IRA that I still have to this day. But I've since rolled that over into another custodian. But yeah, I'll dive deeper into my journey a little bit later. But that's kind of where I was first introduced to money management, as well as the importance of what it was going to take to start a legacy.
Okay, Leanne, what about your early financial journey?
Oh, wow. As John was speaking, I was just thinking about what I remember from what my parents taught me. I think my dad was just always save. You don't need that, save, just save it. Or he was very big on buying things in cash and carrying no debt, no credit cards, no debt at all. Those were the things. Now, was I always great at that? Maybe not. Maybe not always an option when you're an entrepreneur and a single mom. We do the best we can to provide. And with everything is discipline. Being able to, say no, or being able to wait. That's probably, putting my daughter first is a lesson that helps you learn how to be a little bit more patient with what you might want. Tangible. So, yeah.
You mentioned a really key word, discipline. Something I severely lacked as a young soldier. I would say like 75% of my income as a soldier, I was probably sitting at home. Large chunks of money. So when that first and 15th came, especially after basic training in AIT, it was really just enough to buy some gear for the gym. And I was like an East Bay model. At the time, it was like East Bay everything. I was aware of some of the things that I needed to do, like save. Of course we need to save, but I wasn't. I'll admit it. I was just spending money recklessly. The next topic was to strategic planning. That's another thing that I failed on. I did not have a strategic plan to either get an apartment or purchase a home. After my first 4 years in the military, it was like I'm out, and only thing in my mind was finding a good job. Fortunately, I was able to do that. But I would say my discipline really didn't come into play until years later, like a couple decades later. But I can admit that when your income changes, your ability to have some discipline changes. Like it's really easy to say save money if you make it money.
It's different.
And it's like I gotta eat. I gotta get
Yeah.
gas. You know, I got
Mm-hmm.
responsibilities and
Mm-hmm.
support for this kid.
Mm-hmm. So when did that change for
Uh-huh.
you? It was when you had your son?
No, no, no. So I have a daughter, but I
Oh, you have
would
a daughter as
say,
well.
yeah, I do. No, I just have one child, a daughter. She's
Mm-hmm.
14.
Mm-hmm.
I would say
Mm-hmm.
things didn't start getting really good until um I'd say about a year and a half ago.
Mm-hmm.
Rob had a conversation and he gave me a goal.
Mm-hmm.
It was a certain amount to save for liquid
Mm-hmm.
funds,
Mm-hmm.
and I started pushing towards that. Got out of debt, and I literally had zero. I had
Mm-hmm.
nothing to spend the money on.
Mm-hmm.
So of course, it sounds easier to say save money, put it away, buy some
Yeah.
stocks, get a brokerage account, do
Yeah.
this, do that, put
Yeah.
10% here, 10% there, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I just kind of wish, I mentioned that I lacked the discipline. I kind of wish that I just had just a little bit more
Mm-hmm.
uh 20, 30 years ago, because learning
Mm-hmm.
about the compound interest, I realized where I could have been
Right.
right now, even just saving a
Mm-hmm.
little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So that financial education for me was never really pressed upon me. I
Mm-hmm.
remember having a conversation with my mom. Like I literally asked her, like, what is the most amount of money you've ever had in your account?
Mm-hmm.
And she told me the number. She said it was probably like $8,000, but it was a
Mm-hmm.
check that they
Mm-hmm.
deposit to buy a car the next day. So
Yeah.
essentially, she was like, if we had money, then we probably spent that money on food and bills.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I didn't get that. I had to kind of learn the hard way, and this is one of the reasons why I'm trying to save a lot of time and energy, for a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people that I know,
Mm-hmm.
so they can get a good foundation and try to get a little bit more discipline than I had, and the
Mm-hmm.
financial education. So that's kind of where it all is and was for me.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
what about the strategic planning? When did you all learn that you needed to have um, a plan, 10, 20, 30 years from now?
For me, it's probably when I stepped out on my own to start my business. I owned a personal training studio for 16 years, and going into it, it actually, I finally stepped out and did it on my own because I'd come across so many, unfortunate situations with people that I worked for and in their studios, and like I rented space from them. Just a lot of bad um, interactions, some sexual inappropriateness. And so, I got frustrated enough to step out on my own with actually nothing. Um, and after about 3 or 4 months, I was profitable. And I'd already, uh, when you are in need of new things to grow your business, one of my clients actually was the vice president of a bank. And so she really helped me get my things in order as far as, equipment that I was purchasing, how to purchase it, helping me get good rates, just giving me little tips and bits of information on how to not use your money and to borrow money if you're able to continue to run your business. Do your best to not use your own income to continue to move your business forward. That was probably one of the biggest pieces. Um, yeah, but it's still, even though I had some guidance, things change. So I think you do your best to prepare. As an entrepreneur, I've been up, I've been down. You do your best to manage those rough times, and just all the reminder, a big reminder of how important it is to save, to have, a cushion. But
Hmm.
even as a single parent, that wasn't always the option. Wasn't always the
Hmm.
option, but it's
Can,
important to say.
hmm can you expand on the additional income streams before we go to Rob? that you had set up for yourself?
Well, I didn't have that until, um, I think, so in the course of my owning my storefront, I think I signed probably 3 leases. And I knew towards the end of the third one that I was ready to not have a storefront anymore. And it worked really well to close my storefront and operate as someone else's business. But then, after a while, that just wasn't working. And then we had the pandemic. So really, real estate is something I had always had a love and an interest for. I just never thought I could give it 100% of my attention while I was managing my other business. So I didn't do it until, 2, 3 years into the pandemic. So I think the biggest change in how I felt about the way I make income, because I did really well for myself. It was a pandemic. You just can't always, it was just the biggest lesson in how you can't put all your eggs in one basket. Even if you have a business and it's really successful, it's smart to have ways to bring in other income, a product, anything that you could be a part of that gives you more financial stability. I say do it. And I think earlier on I didn't feel like I needed that because I was successful at the one business that I had. But we all learned it's very, very easy to lose it all. Despite our best attempts, anything could happen.
Yeah, Rob, what about yourself on the?
Yeah. So for me, I realized when I needed to have a strategic plan. There were a couple different points. So, and Ty, you're familiar with this. When you first sign up in the military, the first thing that they make sure that you do is you have to sign, or you have to create a power of attorney, and you got to have a will, right? Because you never know when you could be sent overseas to whatever conflict.
Along with that life insurance, that SGLI.
Exactly. And you also sign up for the SGLI life insurance plan. Now, I didn't really know what any of that meant whenever I first signed up because I was so young. But as time went on, I started having conversations and asking more questions. And then as I was getting close to transitioning out of the military was when I said to myself, okay, before I get out of the military, how much money am I going to need to have saved up in order for me to live comfortably, right? Ideally, I wanted to have a job lined up before I got out of the military, but a lot of times you can't control that. You might be unemployed by the time your contract is up and Uncle Sam says, okay, have a good day. So I set a goal for myself to save $10,000. I said, and it was to pay my car off and then save $10,000. So I want to have $10,000 cash for me to be able to transition out of the military and not be in a rush. But what really got to me in terms of the importance of strategic planning was, as I was going through my process of saving, a coworker of mine, his mother-in-law passed. And so his wife is from the islands and his mother-in-law lived in the islands in the Caribbean. And they didn't have enough money to fly down to where she was and to bury her. So, and he was one of the people that I would kind of bounce ideas off of in terms of financial literacy. What are some of the things that I should be doing to prepare? So he knew what I was doing. And he asks me if he can borrow $5,000 in order to be able to fly his family to the Caribbean and to bury his mother-in-law. And that was one of the hardest things that I had to deal with because, of course, you want to be able to support someone who's mentored you. But at the same time, it took me about 1.5 years, 2 years just to save that little $10,000. Right. So it was big to me. And I said, hey, man, I'm sorry, but I can't do that because I'm about to get out of the military, and I need this in order to be able to start my next phase of my journey. And that stuck with me for a long time. And it really put into my mind the importance of preparedness, the importance of making sure that you have an emergency fund, making sure that you're thinking strategically in all aspects, both personally and professionally, as well as what it was going to take in order for me to be able to continue to climb after I hit the milestones that I had put in place. So that was kind of the awakening for me, Ty, on when I really understood the importance of strategically planning financially.
Yeah, mine's gonna kind of bleed into the multiple income streams a little bit. I would say mine started in 2003, my very first deployment. And when you are deployed in Iraq, all that money is tax free. And it gave me a lot of time to think about what I needed to do. One of the people I was deployed with was a National Guardsman that was a financial planner for a major organization. So he sat me down quite a few times and started talking about it. But he was saying one of the reasons he quit is because they were just essentially ripping people off, ripping off old people. But he kind of showed me some things that I needed to do, like investments and things like that. And while I was there, I kind of made my first attempt to get an additional income stream. Like I bought some Iraqi dinar, which was kind of like a strategic goal of mine to be like, even if it goes up, you know, a tiny percent, I have enough, almost like Bitcoin before Bitcoin. Unfortunately, nothing happened with it. I still got it though. But then I also started messing around with things like they have like dummy portfolios online. You can get a Yahoo portfolio with and play around with pretend money and pretend stocks. So everyone that's listening, if you don't know, you can just make pretend that you have $10,000, pick some stocks to invest in, track it, and then if you really want to spend your real money on it, you can. I learned about Motley Fool, Berkshire Hathaway, things like that while I was on that deployment. And even getting into stocks, 'cause Microsoft was the thing. I don't even think Google was even around or Facebook was around at the time. So Microsoft was the thing. And I would always hear them talk about stock splits and all that. And I had no idea what that was. So I started doing the research. And that deployment really gave me, the time and the opportunity to think about what I was going to do with the money. But then I also realized, and it really hit me hard, like when I was a young soldier, that in the military, because you have a pay scale, you already know how much money you're getting, right? And it's almost like you're not spending money, you're spending your time. So if you're only going to make 30K a year, you want to spend a certain amount, you literally just spent 2.5 months of your time. And because of that, I didn't want to be maxed out on how much money I'm going to make during the year. So that's when it started to hit me, like I need to do something else. I don't know what that something else is, but I really do I need to do something else because I don't like being able to look at this pay chart and know how much money I'm going to make by the end of the year. Like it just didn't sit right with me. Like that number it just wasn't enough, you know? So that's what really, really motivated me to get some additional income streams. I realize how important it is, especially now.
It is.
And it's quite addictive.
Yeah, yeah,
It is.
yeah. And and
I ain't
and
gonna lie.
and tied to your point about the income, especially in the military, right?
Mhm.
One of the first things that I did whenever I was comfortable in my role or my job in the military was I got a job at Best Buy, right? I had to make sure that I was making more money than what that pay scale showed, because I said to myself, nah, man, I'm trying to live a certain type of lifestyle. I want to not just depend on Uncle Sam.
Mm-hmm.
And really, you made a great point about valuing your time, right? I mean, really, it comes down to opportunity costs and what that really means in terms of your investment of time in return for X amount of dollars, or the amount of money that it takes in order for you to spend to purchase something. I don't just look at something like my wife, she'll say, I got this on sale. And I'm like, it doesn't matter that it was on sale. It matters of whether or not the amount that they are charging you for it is worth it, right? So I don't really get into sales and all of that stuff, because in my mind, if I'm comfortable with the amount that I'm paying for a particular product, good, or service, it doesn't really matter if I get it on sale. So
that could be a good segue into the smart investments, and then y'all gonna have to take over when we get to the real estate, because I haven't purchased any property yet.
let's do it. Let's do it.
So for the smart investments, I can tell you that I was finally able to land a position where the conversation about things like employee stock plans and the company giving you shares as a bonus. um, I didn't really have those conversations when it came to my job until 3 or 4 years ago, and I realized that I was missing out on that just by not even bringing it up, and not even just being aware that it was an option at almost every company I worked at. But because I was just happy with the salary, I never really asked for the extra, you know. But ask for those things. A lot of companies have the it's called the ESPP, where you can submit a percent of your um, wages. It goes towards the company stock at a discounted price, and at the end of that 6-month term, you get to purchase the stock at the discounted price. Not only at a discounted price, but they sell it to you. I mean, you buy it at the lowest price that stock was in those 6 months, and they give it to you at the highest amount that it was in those 6 months.
Value.
Yeah, so you can really get a nice sized chunk of funds, because you're essentially putting it into your savings, but that savings is purchasing stock.
Right.
And then, my company gives you stock as a bonus, gives some really nice bonuses every year. And, I think we talked about it last week when we were saying that some people don't have a money problem, they have an income problem. When you have extra income, then it's easier to have these conversations. So yeah, that's kind of my tidbits on the smart investments. If you all want to expand on that and then go to the real estate, because like I said, I'm going to have to take a back seat on the real estate portion.
Go ahead, John.
So in terms of examples of smart investments, Ty, is that what you're referring to, or?
Yeah, like what would you consider some smart investments, some things that you have done?
Yeah. So and of course I'm not a finance professional, right? I'm only going to speak off of my personal experiences, things that have yielded a positive or even a negative result for me. But one of the key things that I have found is adjusting my mindset. And a lot of people, they talk about the importance of mindset, but they don't really understand what that truly means. So a friend of mine, he got into the whole financial literacy approach before I did, because remember at the very beginning, I talked about how I had this 65-year-old lady just trying to take all my money, put it away into a lockbox until I'm 59 and a half, saying, okay, then you can access it. So I didn't really have a positive experience. Talking to a friend of mine, he let me know that he had someone mentoring him. And so I said, well, what are y'all talking about? And so that mindset, that's whenever my mindset started to change. It didn't officially change, but it piqued my interest because I saw the way that he was moving resembled the way in which I wanted to be moving. And so then from there, I learned that in order for me to fast track my financial literacy, I needed to get a financial advisor. So I signed up with a financial planner, and I was with her for probably 8 years, maybe 10 years. But I told her, because she said to me, she said, okay, John, what are some of the things that you're looking to achieve? Right. Of course, you go through this whole financial plan, and you have to take an inventory of how much you make, how much you bring in, how much goes out, all of these different things. And then they put together a comprehensive financial plan that is meant to not only focus on today, but over a long span of time. And I told her, her name was Julia. And I said, Julia, look, I said, I'm really, really good at making money. Making money is not hard for me because I have the commitment, the drive, the discipline, and the desire to make money. Managing it, that's a whole different situation. And that's why I'm hiring you. So I need you to teach me how to properly manage my money. So that's strategic, smart investment number one, getting a financial planner. Not saying that I have to stay with her for the rest of my life, which she's not with me anymore. But for almost a decade, my goal, and I paid roughly $600 a year. And my goal was for her to put me on track to where I need to start and focus. I had a booklet that had everything laid out about if I were to go through the plan that she established for me based off of the trends of the market and all of the other variables, where I should be. And I had this target in my head. Okay, I see it on paper. Based off of this, this is where I should be. And that's where I stayed steadfast. Discipline, Leanne, you hit the nail on the head about that, because one of the things about me is that I do not waver once I'm committed to something. So that's another investment. Third investment for me is education. Even though I had my financial advisor, I consumed so much financial literacy type of content, whether it be real estate, whether it be asset planning, whether it be how to invest, whether it be buying and flipping, whether it be all of those different things. If you're in the military, Uncle Sam gives you a lot of money. If you don't know how to use it, which I'll talk about a bit more in terms of how I was able to use it, you're doing yourself a disservice, because we as veterans and soldiers and active duty members, reservists, whatever, you have access to programs that can give you a huge head start. So the fourth smart investment was leveraging the money that I got from my GI Bill to go back to school. And while I was back in school, I got a monthly stipend. I took that stipend and I invested that into purchasing real estate. Coupled that with my VA loan, and I was able to make some very, very smart acquisitions over the course of my life. So definitely don't want to take up too much time, Leanne, but those are four of the most critical smart investments that I've made that have continued to pay dividends to this day.
And for me, other than saving, purchasing my first home, I did really well. I think I purchased at a really good time, and so when it was time for me to sell, I did really well in selling that home. Also, remembering to again use the bank's money. Keep your credit in a decent place, and have a relationship with the people that you work with at your bank that help you get approved for loans, and you use the bank's money. I use my bank's money to purchase the items that I use to run my business every day. All of the equipment, the mirrors, the fans, the things that I had in the bathroom, every tiny little thing, and I worked really hard to pay that off. And so then when, of course, it was time for me to change my work pathway, then I was able to sell those things, obviously, as a profit. So that was another large lump sum of money. So it's saving, it was the investment in real estate and selling it at a decent time. I have looked to see what I possibly would have made if I would have held on to that home to the pandemic. And so I don't like to look at that one. A large injection of funds when I sold my home. When I closed my business, I was able to profit from the things that I had purchased, that I was able to purchase with the bank's money, again, not out of my pocket, and sold those things. And that was another large injection. And then the savings. And one other point, I know sometimes, especially older generation, I would say maybe, my generation and older, like my dad is very focused on one job. He's a hard worker. He's always worked, but it's always one way, to that he was taught to always work, and you're going to get, that paycheck. But having those multiple streams of income creates so much freedom. That is something that I just, had the biggest lesson when we came around to. You think, again, not that I wasn't successful, I was doing well and I was successful, but having those multiple streams of income provides you so much freedom. And I think that was such a big lesson. You think you're doing great and you think you're doing fine until things change. And pandemic was horrible for so many people. I know, so much loss, but it was such a turnaround in my frame of thinking, as far as, that the way that I live. You have to have that, because you never know when things are going to change. But like one of the things that I love so much about my life right now at this point is my freedom. And that's with those multiple streams of income and making a few other smart decisions. John mentioned so many of them, but it's just the peace of mind and the freedom. It's so important. It's worth all the sacrificing and putting things back and not purchasing to have that sense of freedom and peace of mind. It's so worth it. It's so worth it.
Leah, I'm happy you touched on that. John and I talk about that financial freedom quite often. Takes a lot of the anxiety away. Yeah. When you travel or when you're going out to eat, to know that you really ain't got to worry. Some of the time, sometimes I struggle trying to convey that to family. Like if I'm out eating without coming off as if you're losing your humility, but you still would like your family to know that, they don't really have to stress either. I think we touched on that a little bit last week, but that financial freedom can also be a little bit addictive.
It does. It is
as well. And recently, I've started to kind of splurge on myself a little bit because of the financial freedom.
But it's
and I would
okay.
say things, I would say things like, if you want to get that first class flight, do it. If you want to get the big steak, do it. You want to get that 9-ounce pour, do it.
I'm rolling with you. I'm rolling with you.
Do it.
Because on if you've managed to make, change your mindset and do enough of the things that have put you in the position to have a little bit of freedom, I believe in do the things that make you happy. So it's important to relax and do those things sometimes too. It is.
Yeah. And I would also add to that, representation matters, right? It's not just about, you know, emulating somebody that you see that has the type of job that you want. Surround yourself with people who are like-minded. If you aspire to be in a level of comfort financially and you're surrounded by broke folks, the chances of you getting to that point, it's going to be lengthened by 10x, right? But if you're surrounding yourself by folks who aspire, they don't necessarily always have to be where you want to be, but as long as they are going along that journey with you, you'll get there so much faster. I remember the conversation I had with somebody that I respect dearly, and we had gone out, had a great time. He was dropping me off, and he said, "Hey man," he said, "you know, this was years ago." He said, "I want to share something with you." I said, "What's that?" He said, "I hit my first major financial milestone." And he was just super excited about it. I didn't know what he was going to tell me, because remember, at that time in my life, my goal was to save 10,000. He told me, he said, "I have officially become a certified millionaire." And that right there was when I said, okay, right? Okay.
He didn't let you feel that good about yourself too long, did he?
Nope. But that was all I needed to hear. That was all the motivation that I needed, right? Because you have some people that wear all their money on their backs. You have some people, all their money is in their home. But then you have people that are quiet. The people that are not flashy, the ones that are subtle with it. Those are the ones that you got to ask the questions. Because they're the ones that are going to give you the key to getting into that door and really understanding. And at that point was when I said, all right, he looks like me. It's possible.
Yes.
And I set a goal first, 10,000. Hit that 10,000. Then it was like, all right, if I could do 10,000, let me see if I could do 50,000. Took me a while to get to 50,000. I got to 40, and then I'd spend. And I'm going backwards. Then I get back up to 35. Then I spend, and then then it's like, all right, I'm going to focus. Then I hit 50,000 liquid cash. Okay, far from a million, but this is something. Then you go from 50,000. Let me see if I can do 75. Then you hit 75, and you're like, and now you're talking about, if something happens, if my car breaks down, if my AC unit goes out, if, you know, whatever happens unexpected, is this going to set me back? Nope. Because I got a solid emergency fund, right? And then I said, if I could do 75, how about 100? Now it's like, woo! All right.
And then seeing the numbers, seeing the milestones becomes addictive as well. Before we get to some of the more advanced topics like estate planning, I want to ask you all about, you know, that transition to being financially free. And like what it feels like to live in that, you know, because a lot of people would like to either know, you know, and I always talk about, like, some people say they want fame and success, but sometimes people can't handle it, you know, when they get there. So I think that's also important. Talk about that for a little bit.
I can kick that one off, definitely, because it resonates for me. First, I had to understand, what does financial freedom look like? Right? Did I need to have $1 million cash, or do I need to have a total combined set of assets, right? A total estate worth a certain amount. Do I have expenses that are too great for me to be able to manage on my own? And so based on that, I had to understand what it was all about in terms of what financial freedom meant to me. To me, it was, can I at least make sure that all of my expenses for myself, my wife, and my kids are covered? Can I make sure that I have a surplus left over? Can I, at that point, still be able to live the type of lifestyle that I want to live? And if you ask yourself those questions, you'll realize that you don't have to make $1 million a year to be financially free.
That's right.
You have people that are able to retire just making $100,000 a year because their expenses are probably only $30,000 a year. And so
nice.
That right there was when it made me understand what it means truly to be financially free. To me, it's all about being able to do things on my own terms, when I want to do it, how I want to do it, and not having to answer anybody to do it. That is financial freedom for me.
Debt free. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Not to cut you off, but I was asking that mental and emotional transition to being early in your financial freedom. And I'll talk about mine in a little bit, to being early in your financial freedom stage, to reaching, the humble, quiet part when you're at like year 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Yeah. It was
and more. So
it was uncomfortable in the beginning. It was uncomfortable because I'm now dealing with an amount of money that I was not accustomed to dealing with. Then you get to a point to where you're like, all right, I'm comfortable with it. I need to add to it. And then you're testing yourself to see what you start spending money on. And then after you get past that point, it's like, all right, now we're not just talking about acquiring things, we're talking about building wealth. So for me, it was a series of transitions that I made where I went from having a rich mentality, a poor mentality, to a rich mentality, to now a wealth mentality, because I spend my money differently. I spend more time in sweatpants and t-shirts than I do with flashy things. Most of the time, I don't hardly wear anything with logos because I don't want people to assume anything about me. I'm very nondescript. I drove a Toyota Prius for almost a decade. Mugs didn't know.
How many zeros? They didn't know how many zeros.
But see, the thing is, it's about creating a level of comfort for you and your family. And so that for me, Ty, was what it was like from, going through the different stages. It was seeing someone that looked like me achieve it, experience it, grow through it, and now continue to build.
What about you, Leah?
Gosh, I think for me, some of those lessons were, of course, I did things I did things the hard way. Wouldn't change it, but definitely having a child very young, understanding that whatever happens, whether, we have a surplus or not, this person has to be taken care of. And so I was very driven as far as work. And now, what John was saying about, would you say a rich mindset to a wealth mindset, and then back to living, at your means. I think one of the best things about that is, like, most recently, paying off, several years ago, paying off, all my debt, and being able to live so many years without, with my expenses being so small, my overhead being so small, and living in a place that, an area that I love, and but also having the option to purchase something and choosing not to, like cars, for instance. I've driven my car for a little bit. It works fine. Could I get a new one? I could, but I also don't. I also like my freedom. You know what I'm saying? Having more financial freedom and not having to sacrifice on any of the other things. I can keep a budget. Like I'm able to pick and choose to do the things. I get to prioritize the things that I want to do. And I'm not so wrapped up in I have to have this because other people have it. And being at peace, not feeling, not saying that there ever was competition, but you know, sometimes it can feel like that. I'm living a certain way. I'm doing this or that, and I should have this or that. But it is such a peace and sense of self to pick and choose the things you want to spend your money on, and being confident in it. You know, not feeling like I have to keep up with the Joneses, and purchase something just because I have the surplus of money.
So, you know, for me, um, I distinctly remember being broke and being
It
poor,
happens.
you know, for a very long time throughout my
Mm-hmm.
childhood and young adulthood.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the things that I still struggle with my parents now is trying to explain to them the difference between being broke and being poor. And I feel like being poor is a mindset and being broke
Mm,
is temporary.
yeah, temporary.
So I try to convince, you know, my parents that we're definitely not broke anymore. But,
Mm-hmm.
you know, my father still will save Pepsi bottles and fill them with water, you know,
Mm-hmm.
keep them under the sink. You know, my
Mm-hmm.
mom will still try to hoard, like if we go grocery shopping, you know, and I
Mm-hmm.
try to get them to realize, you know, we can just come back and, you know, we don't have to get it all right now as if we're not going to have it
Yeah.
next week. You know what I mean? If we're
Mm-hmm.
here, if we're at this restaurant, then you don't really have to, you know, look at the price, you know, just order what you
It
would
really
like.
makes it
And
enjoy.
some of
Yeah.
the things that I'm doing, I could tell that they, you know, I'll get questions like, Ty, you know, that's a lot. You know, you can spend all this money. And, you know, those are some of the things that I struggle with. I will tell you
Mm-hmm.
that you know, I feel like I'm transitioning from that F it, I got it mindset.
Mm-hmm.
I got it. Let's just do it. Like I don't
Do
even
it.
care. To
Mm-hmm.
being a little bit more humble with
Mm-hmm.
it. And as John mentioned, just kind of like living in that Black excellence and normalizing it. You know, like it's
Mm-hmm.
not a big deal, you
Mm-hmm.
know, if I order the whiskey or get the steak or fly first
Mm-hmm.
class, and I try to carry myself as if this should
Mm-hmm.
be normal if you see someone like me in here. So, you know, I would go get the McAllen, you know,
Mm-hmm.
but it's just, I don't know, it's just some of the things that I try to do. I try to tip well, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and I just try to do the
Absolutely.
little things so they, you know, on the other side, they're not being presumptuous about how cheap I may be, you know,
Mm-hmm.
because they've seen a lot of people that look like me be cheap.
Mm-hmm.
So
It's
yeah,
not cheap,
I'm
it's smart.
yeah,
Not
and
cheap, it's smart.
I,
Yeah.
I I
I
feel
have
like
a friend that will
uh-huh,
spend on a lot of more tangible things. And
uh-huh,
I have found that balance. One of the things that makes me the happiest is the
mhm,
traveling. So I do my best. And that's something that we didn't talk about. Also making sure that you're using your credit cards. If you have to have credit card debt, that you're using those as smartly as you can to get those the cash back and the mileage. That's definitely, I don't think, I mean, man, I had so many miles that I hadn't bought a plane ticket and really don't like to pay for plane tickets. I've had to buy a few, you know, not recently, but that is one of the biggest blessings about having a credit card debt and using that to uh, fund something like the plane tickets, you know, that allow me to do the things that I enjoy, like travel, even the hotel stays. You can earn your
oh
Mhm.
yeah, yeah,
miles,
yeah, 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 yeah,
and you
yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah.
one of
Mhm.
the
Yep.
smartest things you can do is figure out, you know, all the advantages, finding out all the things that you actually can pay for on your credit card,
Mhm.
um, and use that to, I use those things to fund the thing that I like to do the most, which is travel. Yeah, but definitely on clothes, I don't spend in that manner. And John, I maybe have to back your wife up a little bit because that might be what my
Sales, huh?
just the leather
Sales.
goods, just the leather goods, just the leather goods.
But Leah, you make a great point about the credit card usage, right? That's critical. I mean, I use my credit card for everything.
Yes, me
everything.
Too.
I don't care if I'm going to McDonald's to buy a large fry. I use my credit card because those points add up.
They do.
And it's mindset. If I'm already going to have to spend the money from my checking account, why not get rewarded by just using a different means in which to pay it, and then I pay the money from my checking account to the card.
That's right.
You're not taking on extra debt. You're just using a different means in which to pay for the product or the service or whatever it is. I mean, everything from utilities to my kids' tuition. We use a credit card.
Right. I pay my rent.
That's right. And we get the points for every single thing. And then we turn right around and we use those points to either cover fully or subsidize the cost of experiences, right?
Yes.
Whether it be trips and other things that you had mentioned. So yeah,
absolutely.
Totally agree. And one other thing that I would add is from an estate planning, I'm not an estate planning, but from a legacy building perspective, credit and building credit for your kids, right? So all three of my kids have credit cards. They don't know it, but they are able to leverage my credit score. So whenever they do become adults, they will be ready to purchase their own car, their own home, whatever, and they will be able to leverage my credit that I've built over years without having to start at ground zero paying 20-25% interest for anything.
Right.
So, yeah. I also saw something about hiring your kid. And if you hire your kid, then they can start their 401k now.
Yeah, you can do. I have not done that, but I've also heard about it. But each of my kids do have their own credit card. And for folks that are watching this, depending on your credit card company, different credit card companies have different age limits. So my kids are 2, 4, and 6. And each one of them have a credit card because the credit card company that I'm using does not have an age requirement. So they will have 18 to 20 years worth of credit history built up by the time they actually need it.
I did do that when my daughter went to college. I did add her as an authorized user. Also, just for safety and for backup if she ever needed anything. But yeah, that's about when she started. Of course, that's also, unfortunately, when they start sending children, new college students credit card offers and giving them, credit cards to use. Thank God my daughter's been really smart about her decisions. But yeah, I added her as an authorized user. And so she had decent credit. And proud to say she is very self-sufficient. She will never have to worry about herself or her children. It is such a blessing. Yeah.
Yes, I know we touched on it a little bit. I think we have maybe one or two more topics. There is a little bit more about the estate planning that I wanted to talk about. I know me myself. Definitely started with the life insurance, the will, and I'm just now getting into, the estate planning and inheritance now that there's something to inherit, for me, I just have one daughter, so it's quite easy. But over time, there are things that I started to manage differently. I have nieces and nephews and godchildren, and there are some things that I would like my sister to handle, in my absence. So there are some things that I'm doing. Can you all talk about that as well?
Mm-hmm.
Some of the things
Well,
that you feel are
go ahead.
important to do, when it.
Beyond a shadow of a doubt, it's the insurance policy. And who the beneficiary, have it clearly stated in your will who's the beneficiary of what, and in your absence, who's going to manage that. Everything that you own. Um, Also, and one of the other lessons, I don't want to move away from the estate planning, but when you um, even if you work for a company, I think it's so important, and as we're talking about these multiple streams of income, to make sure that, if at all possible, whatever is your side hustle, or that second or third stream of income, that it's running under a corporation, so you have, or you have an LLC for it, so that it is, has a little bit more protection. And then again, as we were speaking out before, hiring your children, I believe you can pay them up to like 12 or $14,000 a year as income. I believe your children, something like that. But yes, my biggest thing was the insurance policy, and the making sure I have a clear will of who the beneficiaries are and who will manage it.
Yeah, I agree, Leanne. Some of the things that I've personally done, of course, life insurance, that's kind of the foundation, right? Um, considering that my kids are so young, you also have to keep in mind that children are not able, upon your
Yep.
untimely passing, they're not able to receive
Mhm.
those death benefits. So you have to make sure that if you identify someone to be the custodian for your children, make sure that they're trustworthy.
Mhm.
Um, and then on top of that, you got to also kind of look down the road, right? So looking at whether or not the particular custodian that you've identified may also be at risk of an untimely passing
Mhm.
based off of pre-existing conditions and things like that. So just some things to keep in mind. A will is useful, but one of the things that my wife and I we've been looking into, and we've already had a series of meetings with an attorney. We're in the process of establishing a trust,
Mhm.
right? One of the biggest differences between a will versus a trust is with a will, it will still identify who should be considered a beneficiary, but you will have to go through probate.
Mhm.
And with probate is when everything is tied up in litigation. You have attorneys, you have judges that have to make determinations, and it
Mhm.
can take a very long time,
Mhm.
especially considering the fact that um, whenever your estate is in probate, you are open to other people contesting
Mhm.
access to your estate. A trust, um, from what I've been educated from an attorney most recently, is oftentimes considered the most safest option
Safe. Mhm.
because of the fact that you do not go through probate.
Mhm.
Um, and what I'm talking about is a um, is a living trust
Yeah.
that allows me and my wife to be able to control the distribution of assets. We can
Mhm.
add and we can take from it. There's two different types primarily that are oftentimes talked about, which is revocable or irrevocable.
Mhm.
So irrevocable is going to be a lot more rigid, not having the flexibility to be able to make modifications, whereas revocable, you can still cancel it out if you decide to, things like that. But it is another vehicle of protection to ensure that your assets are allocated properly. You can still invest through a trust. You can't invest through a will.
Will. Mhm.
Um, there are all kinds of things that you can add to a trust. So essentially, your trust becomes the custodian of your assets,
Mhm.
which essentially takes the ownership from you and frees up the trust to be able to operate sort of like a business entity.
Mhm.
So those are some of the things that we have either already put in place in terms of life insurance. Both my wife and I, we have insurance policies,
Mhm.
um, uh, a trust, and then some other things that people may not realize in terms of risk exposure. Right, depending on what you do in terms of liability, you may also want to consider what's called an umbrella policy.
Mhm.
And an umbrella policy is meant to be able to cover the gap on what
Oh,
your insurance policies do not
doesn't
cover.
cover.
So it's
Mhm.
kind of like if you were to associate it to something that's more relatable, think about when you buy a vehicle and they ask if you want gap insurance.
Right. Gap insurance.
And gap insurance is typically meant to cover the gap in which your vehicle's value is versus what you owe. And so an umbrella policy is meant to be able to kind of serve as an enhancement to the policies that you may have to ensure that you're protected, because there's folks that are always looking at opportunities to be able to capitalize on your misfortune.
Absolutely.
Um, so those are just a few of the things, and you can get so much more advanced, Ty.
Mhm.
Um, but those are just some of the things that immediately come to mind in terms of credit,
Mhm.
life insurance, um, either a will or a trust, making sure that you're making sound investments and you are having as few of your assets in your personal name as possible,
Mhm.
because that is whenever you open yourself up to a greater amount of risk exposure.
Mhm. That's true. Yep.
Leanne, you were going to say something?
Oh no, I was just in agreement with everything. Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
Who would like to take this question? What can you do if you don't have a business and just work in a corporate job? There's a lot of info for
Mhm.
entrepreneurs, but what if you're not one?
So I'm talking specifically from W-2 corporate perspective, right?
Mhm.
So I'm everything that I've talked about is not based off of entrepreneurial
Entrepreneurship.
accomplishments.
Mhm.
So what I would recommend are some of the things that were covered earlier. So if you work for a company, don't just rely solely on company sponsored life insurance,
Mhm.
company sponsored disability insurance, whether it be
Mhm.
temporary or what they call short term or long term disability. I would also, and these are all things, like I said, that I've personally done to ensure that myself as well as my family is protected. Get other policies outside, right? Disability insurance. A lot of people, they may not think about if you become incapacitated and you can't go to work, your
Mhm.
job is only going to give you the amount of money based off of your salary that you've had saved up in PTO or paid time
Mhm.
off.
Mhm.
Then after that, you go into some type of short-term or long-term disability program that they have, which oftentimes lasts no more than 6, maybe 12 weeks, maybe 14 if you're lucky. So then what do you do after all that money runs out when you've only received your short-term or long-term disability at 65 or 75% of your income? You got to have something to supplement.
Mhm.
So if you have a secondary disability policy or something along those lines, that will help to beef up that shortfall in your corporate income.
Mm.
Mhm.
Something else that you may want to consider is just making sure that you have multiple streams of income,
Mhm.
right? It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to get a second job. You can sell things on eBay, and that is considered a secondary stream of income.
Mhm.
It could be that you acquire a piece of real estate in which you rent it out and you're able to receive monthly payments from your tenants, right? These are all things that you can do with a corporate job that are completely independent of your corporate job, so that you have the peace of mind to be able to sleep well, knowing that if all is lost, you're from your 9-to-5 job, that you're not completely with nothing. So just a couple of ideas that I personally have instituted and still do to this day.
Yeah, don't
You
be.
kind of touched.
Yeah,
Go, sorry, go. I
no,
was going to
you
say,
got it.
John kind of touched on it earlier. Maybe this person wasn't on then, but when you are onboarding to whatever job that you are moving into, if you're working some sort of, really any job, doesn't have to be a corporate job, any job at all. That I know that onboarding process, it's so much paperwork and so much
Mhm.
detail, but try to get, or someone in HR or some sort of counselor or some sort of liaison that will talk with you about all the details of what this company may offer to you and how it works to your benefit. And don't be scared to ask the questions. Don't just go in and sign the paperwork.
Mhm.
Take it home, read through it all. You figure out, write down your questions and go back in and make sure you have a clear understanding of all the benefits that this job might offer. Like you said, Ty, that you were leaving money on the table, not understanding maybe how things would roll over to another job, or, oh, I didn't know I could do this, or the advantages of, their buying the stocks. Make sure you have a very clear understanding of, it doesn't matter at what level of your job, most jobs have some sort of perks. And definitely don't be afraid to ask about those, and make sure you have clarity on all the things that you have available to you through that job, being an employee to that business.
Mhm.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I was definitely going to
Mhm.
say, don't be afraid to do a deep dive on your
Mhm.
company's benefits package,
Mhm.
because a lot of that stuff can be rearranged
That's right.
or adjusted. You
Mhm.
can kind of like adjust salary for
Mhm.
stock and bonuses for salary, and vice versa. Plus, there's maybe little things that may not be a big financial hit to you,
Mhm.
but could pay
Mhm.
off later. Like
Mhm.
sometimes they'll have like a health savings account.
Yes.
Sometimes it's like
HSA.
a,
Mhm.
just $1,000 or so that you could
Mhm.
just spend like every
Mhm.
time you go to CVS, or anything that's health related, or like even if it's like, what do I use it on? Like uh deodorant, boxing gloves, jump rope,
Mhm.
stuff like that.
Mhm.
Um, I know my company has like $100 a month of just free chiropractor
Mhm.
services. Anything that you're doing to benefit yourself, most
Mhm.
companies will help you
Mhm.
as well. Um, and you may be
Therapy
able
and mental health as
to,
well. The
yeah, yeah,
therapy and
Mhm.
mental
indeed,
health as well. Yes.
indeed.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
I know,
And when in doubt, YouTube it. There's going
That's
to
yeah,
right.
be some YouTube for whatever
yeah,
question you have about anything.
Yeah.
Use it to do the research
yeah,
and get different points of opinion or different ways to. I learned even that much more over the pandemic as far as even real estate, just watching
Mm.
how some people move through their processes and how many people were teaching, like you
hmm
said, wealth strategies with real estate. I
yeah.
learned so
Um,
much. So
Yeah.
hmm
use your
And
resources.
some companies, like my company, will pay to work out. They
Hmm.
pay to pick up trash. They'll
Hmm.
pay for a charity of my choosing. So it could be like a
Wow.
friend's charity,
Yeah.
and not pay, but they'll match.
Yes. Yeah.
They'll
That's
match.
good. I know that.
If
Hmm.
there's one more thing, I know I'm gonna make a joke about this. I didn't get the benefit from it, but sometimes a company will really give you a nice paternity package. Ain't that
Yes.
right?
Ah.
Yes. 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 Yes.
Hmm.
I've definitely taken advantage of that.
Hmm. Hmm.
But everything's negotiable, especially in corporate
Hmm.
America. I mean, I've negotiated everything from salary to PTO, right?
Hmm.
Let's just say there was one company that I used to work for, and they said that their standard leave policy is that you only start off with 2 weeks of leave until you've reached 3 or 5 years tenure in the company. And I said,
Hmm.
no, I'm going to need at least another week on top of that.
Hmm.
And they gave it to me, right?
Hmm.
everything is negotiable. There is nothing off the table. If one company won't do it, I guarantee you, especially with how aggressive companies are for hiring quality top tier talent, there's another company that will. And we neglected to mention 401ks. 401ks can be very beneficial.
Yes.
But just talk to your financial advisor on what is going to be the best allocation for you. I mean, you have to understand what your risk tolerances are. And some folks are much more aggressive. You could be conservative, you could be moderately aggressive, ultra aggressive. There are so many different things that you can do in terms of how much risk you're willing to accept. But it's always good to get the company match if your company provides it.
And for the entrepreneurs, I will say as well, it is so important to have a smart tax person or CPA person that teaches you how to file your taxes, because that is something that could be such a huge added expense if you're not prepared for it as well.
Yeah, that's for entrepreneurs as well as non-entrepreneurs. So I also have a tax accountant, and they're the ones that are able to find those loopholes that TurboTax is not going to show you.
I found it a lot easier to just invest in that CPA.
Yes.
Yeah.
Go back and fix the years past. If someone realizes that there's things that have been mistakes, like it might take a little bit more expense to have them do the work on the end, but it's going to benefit you so much to have your tax structure properly done.
Yeah.
Indeed. So the last topic was financial discipline. I think we touched on it a little bit, but Leanne, if you do want to touch on it and then add some closing statements before we sign off, please
John,
do that.
John, I'll let you go first while I think about that one. What I want to leave you with.
Okay. So in terms of financial discipline, like I said, I've been very transparent about how it was not an easy road. It was not just a straight journey. There were some start and stops. There were some, let me take 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, because I kept spending, right? Not realizing that in order for me to truly get to where I wanted to be, and this is something that a lot of very successful folks in different realms, they always talk about how important it is to hit your first 100,000. The hardest part to creating wealth is crossing over your first 100,000. After you have reached $100,000, then you start, it's like a snowball effect, right? Because now you start to, if you're the type that wants to invest in the stock market, you're going to get larger returns on your investment compared to if you're only putting $10 in, right? If there's $100,000 in that account in which they can invest, you're going to get that compounding snowball effect much faster. Discipline is key in everything. And I tell my son this: there are 2 ways to ensure success: discipline and details. If you pay attention to the details and you're disciplined about your approach, you will almost certainly guarantee success financially and otherwise in anything that you do. The reason why I think that this is such an important topic that I'm constantly talking to my kids, even though they're very young, is because I want to make sure that although I am working very hard to create a legacy for them, it has to continue to go beyond them, their kids, their kids' kids, and so on. And so learning and understanding how to invest your time and your money, as well as being patient in your approach, I have found personally, as well as emulating other folks that I know that are very successful, those that are on this call, as well as not on this call, one thing remains true and consistent across the board is that they've all taken the time, they've all committed a level of discipline, and they are the master of their crafts in more than one thing. And then just in closing, I would say there's not always just one way to make money. You can make money on anything. Anything. I'm a cybersecurity professional, and for 3 years, I ran a small landscaping business. Anything. Think about what it is that is profitable, and you can do what's called a Google search on the industry and put TAM, total addressable market, and that'll tell you how much that particular industry generates in terms of revenue. And that lets you know whether or not there's significant opportunity for you to be able to tap into it. So.
Okay, so I will piggyback on that and say, with just the same as it is with a lot of things in life, having some short-term goals and long-term goals. You know, having that big, like you said, the 50,000 and the 75 and then 100,000 may be your bigger goals, but it may just be that, some of the smaller ones along the way are, I'm going to eat in instead of eating out as much as I normally do. So I think that's always very important. Along with that discipline, it's the short-term goals, the long-term goals, and with your children. I mean, I feel like you probably could do another whole show on what has transpired from generation to generation. Like my parents' generation were the savers, and the children did without, and then we got to this, my generation where we don't want our kids to have to worry about this, that, and this, that, and the other, and then you get a group of the next generation that maybe in some people's eyes are not quite as tough because they've been given so much, when our generation, the intention is to make things easier for your children, or easier than what you felt like you had it with your parents. But I feel like with your children, John has said it repeatedly, it's being an example and educating them. But I also think, just not giving them everything they ask for, giving them, the chores. I know that, maybe old, but rewarding them for good grades, and, giving them some sort of structure to receiving the reward, and understanding I have to work for something, I think is really important with your children. And definitely, once my daughter got to a certain age, and she was getting her first job, and as she got settled, I wasn't continuing to carry her bills. I slowly was passing things off to her so that she'd learn. Now you're making this money doesn't mean you get to blow it. Now you have to learn to be responsible for the things that you have to pay for to live life, but then also the things that you want.
Yeah. Before I forget, I just want to say thank you all so much for joining. This was very educational, even for me. If I had some last words, I would say try to contribute what you can to your financial literacy every day. Like I often say, treat it like a 401k, even if it's just cybersecurity education or anything that you're doing with health, your mental mindset. Like try your best to contribute something, as much as you can, as often as you can, because eventually, that compound interest is going to kick in. It may not be easy at first. I know I was personally in a position to where I looked at the calendar and I was like, I'm not going to have nothing for the next 9 months. But if I stay disciplined, when these 9 months are over, life is going to be really good, And now I'm starting to have those conversations. Rob, thank you so much for being, my consigliere, my motivation, someone that I would bounce ideas off of. Should I do this? Should I not do that? Everyone in the audience, thank you for joining. Last week, we touched on just the mental health aspect of trying to make this happen, for your family, everything that comes with the pressure, the anxiety, you know, the why we're doing it, your purpose, all that. We talked about all that last week. So if you missed it, definitely go and take a look at that. This week, you know, we talked about like how to do it. We got a little bit more specific with it. Next week, I'm going to try not to get emotional, but next week, it was supposed to be a series on mommy issues. So I talked to my mom about it, and my mom said, why don't you do one on daddy issues? So I said, you know what, Mom? Challenge accepted. So guess what I'm gonna try to make happen next week? I'm gonna travel to Savannah, and I'm gonna try to have a live conversation with my biological father.
Oh, wow. All right.
If you've watched any of my panels, you know I wouldn't ask you all to do anything that I wouldn't do myself. So I have been working on a video on how I've actually met or found him and some of my siblings, but I never really had a conversation in a long time. We probably had maybe 2, 3, maybe 4 total conversations in my whole life, but I think I'm gonna try to make that happen next week. So
it's gonna be big. Is it gonna be just the 2 of you, or are you still gonna
be just the 2 of us? I got the mics, I got all the camera equipment set up. You know, I'm gonna be on the road on my way to DC anyway. And you know me, I'm not afraid to put myself out there, you know, especially if it's gonna help someone else. So be on the lookout for that, and we'll see if we can make that happen. But then we're definitely gonna do the mommy issues one after that, and that's because
Lord,
you know, I hit up Kojo, and Kojo agreed to come on to also talk about his mommy issues. So
the best
I think
energy.
it's important, and right, and it doesn't have to be a negative thing. You know, it could just be about, hey, some of the things, you know, with my parents have affected me today. And I need to get it off my chest because it's there subconsciously, whether I know it or not. You know,
include who you choose, why you accept what behavior from whatever person, finding love, why you haven't found it in so many ways.
Yes, it does. It affects you so many aspects of your life. So thank you all again. I'll see you all next week. Thank you for joining. Thank you, Leanne and John.
Thank you. And, nice to meet you, John.
Likewise.
See you all next week.
All right. Thanks, Ty.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.